That's the one. Cue up a fancy intro. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to have a little camera talk with all of you. This is the Sony A7S III. It's by far my favorite camera that I've used, and it gets me the best image quality I've ever been able to produce. All the user functions are there that I would like, but there's one problem with this camera. And that one problem probably would have kept me from buying this in the first place. I'm not here to sell you the camera or tell you to buy it or not to buy it. This is just information that I wish I had known prior to making the decision to buy this. If we rewind back in time, at one point I had the Sony A7 III and the Sony A6400. I was happy with both of those cameras. That was my AB setup, full frame, crop sensor. I used the Sony A6400 a whole bunch, and that camera was one of my favorite little vlog cameras. Honestly, I used it a lot, and I was starting to use it more than the Sony A7 III. I replaced the Sony A7 III with the Sony A7Siii to get a slightly smaller body, to get a couple more features, and at that point, I got so pumped to buy it when I saw the YouTube hype cycle starting. You got all the YouTubers making videos with the Sony A7S III, 10-bit color, 4K 120, and I was so stoked, and I had a friend who wanted to buy my Sony A7 III. Fast forward, got rid of it, bought the Sony A7S III in the pre-sale. The main reason I had bought this camera was to upgrade to getting 10-bit color and being able to go from 1080 120, 120 frames per second, to 4K 120 frames per second, 10-bit color. For me, that was the main selling feature. It was like, I wanted to shoot that crispy 4K 120. I kind of really like shooting slow-mo, probably more than I actually should. That was ultimately what led me to make my buying decision. Got the Sony A7S III, took it on a trip, shot a bunch of 4K 120, shot a bunch of all intra 24 frames per second, which takes up a lot of data, by the way. Just got reps on the camera. Brought it back home, got it into Premiere, started editing. Here's what I learned, and here's the information I wanted to pass along to you, is that a lot of these codecs are almost impossible for Premiere to use. And I thought at one point it was just because I was using a MacBook Pro, and that MacBook Pro just didn't have the processing power to process these codecs. And then I actually bought an iMac desktop. The iMac's pretty sweet. It's definitely an upgrade in processing power, but it still won't process these codecs. And maybe somewhere down the road, Premiere will get you an upgrade and you will be able to process this information. But 4K 120 is basically unusable, as well as all intra 24 frames is unusable unless you do some type of proxy workflow. Now, proxy workflow is basically when you take the footage and you create a proxy for it, a smaller, more manageable file, then Premiere then actually renders out the original file. But when you make proxies, like, it's another step in your workflow. It makes everything more complicated. What that means for me is that really I have not been using 4K 120. The main reason that I upgrade, spent the extra money to get the A7S III, and now this thing is basically very similar to the Sony A7Siii, my other camera. I like this. I will shoot some 10-bit 24 frames with this as well, so I get that last little bit of color. But you're talking about going double the price point to go from A7Siii to go to this, or to go from A7 III to go to this. And I was actually really happy with the Sony A6400 I was using at the time. What does that mean for you? I don't know. It just depends on what you want the camera for, what kind of computer you're using that can actually process this. Most of your standard computers, without them getting all hopped up, aren't going to be able to process this footage, at least the higher end images out of this, without using some type of proxy workflow. Some of you are going to be okay using proxy workflow because you're okay with it. For me, in the amount of time it takes, it's just not worth using. So there it is. I said it. I've used this camera for about a year now. I dig it. It gets me the highest image quality I've ever had. Having the flippy screen is great. It's a very high quality image, but ultimately, I probably would not have bought this had I known that I wasn't going to be able to use 4K 120 the way I'd initially thought I would, which was by just getting it into Premiere and having Premiere read the file, and it just doesn't work that way. So it doesn't stop me from using this. I still shoot a lot of 1080 120. I still use this camera probably 50% of the time. I like my Sony A7Siii because it gets me most of the image quality in a smaller body, in a smaller, more portable body. This is my A camera, B camera setup. I wanted to put that out into the world because I wish I would have known that when I pulled the trigger on this. It's a dope camera. I enjoy using it. It's beautiful, fits in my hand really well. Having 12 megapixels actually doesn't really hold up my photography. I've blown up images. I think it works great. I really don't have any other complaints about this, but 4K 120, 10-bit was really the reason I bought it, and I don't really use it. So there's my big sad story. You can play me the world's smallest violin. I have it. It's not going anywhere at the time being, but it's something I wish I had known prior to making the buying decision. But I was part of the pre-sale. I was part of the YouTube hype cycle. I appreciate y'all hanging out, having this little camera talk with me. If you want me to do a full in-depth review on the camera, I'm happy to dive into more of the details, but I just wanted to put this out there. Maybe you're on the fence of buying it or not. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and I will catch you back here for the next one.